So one hand on the heart and one hand reaching up, and then just swapping them round. Let the head tilt to the side. The head almost becomes horizontal so that you can get added extension in the arm. Beware of keeping the head unnaturally still. And then the same thing, but on the horizontal. So reaching forwards. Allow the head to turn. The head and the eyes turn more than any other part of the body. Tearing silk. There's a relationship between the hands, the sort of tearing. I think of pulling in a boat. So to pull this hand in is quite difficult because there's something resisting it. And the same with the hand going out, it's having to push against something to get out. But always working against resistance. And then the same thing really, but now just punching to the side. So now I have to twist just a little bit more. And I can really get my head around so it's almost directly behind me. Try some of the palming. So rubbing the hands. And then just palming. The important thing is that you block out all of the light. So it's as black as can be. And then just bringing the hands down. And now the blinking. Closing the eyes strong and then opening them strong. And blinking quickly. And then just relaxing, meditating. So when we meditate, when we do the Tai Chi, the eyes are meant to be hooded. Vision is sort of blurred. And you're just looking inside. But the other end of my line of sight is going down into my belly. But the palming relaxes the eyes, relaxes the anxiety in the eyes, the need to focus on things and latch on things. Architects have a saying, there's nothing more beautiful than an empty room. And for us, it's like there's nothing more peaceful than an empty mind. And in a way, they're the same. The mind is just like the room that's had all the clutter removed from it. So that's the idea of meditation. You're decluttering the mind. And it helps if you're in an empty room. So central equilibrium. Feeling the balance between the down and the up. The down is gravity, the earth drawing, pulling my mass down. My mass is centered in my center of gravity, my danchen. So that's where I feel the force of the earth acting upon me. So this is being pulled down. You can feel it in the sacrum instead of the danchen. They're very close to each other. So because of the bent legs, my thighs are angled into the ground like this, and my knees are further forwards than my hips. So when I sink, my sacrum drifts forwards a little bit. So the earth is drawing me down. The earth is trying to claim my matter. And then we have the heavens. So the vast emptiness around the earth that is behaving like a vacuum that's sucking the non-material. So there's a sense that your spirit is being called. But they say, you know, in the Catholic Church, they say when you pray, you have simply heeded the constant call to prayer. God is always calling you to prayer. So if you decide to pray, it's not your decision. What's happened is you've just finally heard. You've opened your ears. So there's this pull. This pull is just the call to prayer. You're being pulled all the time. And when we're standing here like this, we just want to wake up to that. So what's important is to appreciate that we can only properly wake up to this if we have woken up to the earth's pull upon us. They belong together. And that is central equilibrium. So in the same way that when I sink, my sacrum feels as though it's drifting forwards a little bit. When I wake up to this, it feels like I want to sort of lean back and face upwards. The sacrum goes down and forwards, and the sternum tends to lift and drift back a little bit. So this is why we need the arms out front to balance the tendency to fall backwards. So when we become engrossed in our worldly affairs, then we forget this, and then we get depressed. So this is something that we need to be coming back to all the time through the day. And now let's breathe. Really, this is an exercise for the spine. Here I'm trying to curl the spine up into like a ball, a circle. And then here I'm opening it up and extending the two ends of my spine. My head is reaching back, my tail is reaching back. And now the head pulls forwards and the tail comes under. The struggle is with the legs, really. Allowing my legs to hold the sacrum, but very lightly. So the legs don't grip too firmly, so that my spine can have as much freedom as movement as possible. And then back into riding horse. And now try to feel the central equilibrium as a balance of energies rather than forces. Force has you in a grip. Energy is the feeling of something flowing through you. So I want to feel gravity as a flow down my spine, particularly, splitting at the sacrum and flowing down the legs. And then the levity, the upward, I can feel that as almost like a growth, like these tendrils coming out of the ground, creeping up my spine, down my arms, into my hands, up into my head and out. So I think it's important that when you visualize, the way you visualize the down is quite different than the way you visualize the up, so that they remain separate in your psyche, in your spirit. Okay, let's just bring the feet up. And now just getting the spine just to sway on this side to side plane. Imagine you're holding two buckets. So you allow one bucket to go down and the other one just comes up in sympathy. And then you switch round. Imagine these buckets are quite heavy, so you're having to be really quite careful not to slosh the water, but also careful of your own body because it's putting quite a bit of strain. And just allow the head to tip over. Let's just try bouncing a little bit. So we want this spring in the legs. So when we're standing, we're never locking the legs out. There's always possibility of this bounce. Relaxing the hips, which means the hip joints here, but it also means the sacroiliacs. But just the feeling of looseness in this whole area. It's always the problem area. Hips, shoulders, jaw. For me, when we grow up, are we grown up? There's two things that we tend to lose. There's the imagination and a sense of play. So this should feel playful. Play is really just energy. It's just movement. There's always the possibility of movement. Allowing the arms to alternate. So now you'll be naturally just pulled from leg to leg a little bit, and there'll be a little turn. Imagine you're doing this with a group of kids. They'd really get into it, and they'd start being silly. Another visualization is just imagine you've got these ribbons tied to different parts of your body, and you have to get each ribbon fluttering in the air. So we're just trying to get every part of our body moving relative to its neighbors. This is what we call dynamic equilibrium. So the equilibria that we try to establish are full of movement. Nothing's frozen. And now just keep that sort of loose, playful quality. And now just coming in and just doing the heart qigong. Yeah, so this has got a very clear design, but we just want to keep that loose, playful quality. And just activate the imagination. So you see these movements pluming out of you before they actually manifest in the body. So my mind has already established this path, but it's a florid path. It's not this clear, it's not like a diagram that's been drawn carefully. It's just full of feeling and detail. And my body just can't do it justice. It's trying. We want to feel the absolute importance of turning. If I don't turn, then basically there's no imagination. So here I'm sort of wriggling through this path. And it's the turning, the wriggly turns that gives it its playfulness and its color, its scent. And the turning is really just the playful interaction of the two sides of my body, my left and my right side, having like a game of tennis, turning one side, turning the other. Now let's try just a little bit of going backwards and forwards. So what we want to get into is the yielding. So the straight, the attack, becoming round, becoming the yield. In order to yield, I have to make a hole. I have to make space for the other person. And that feels like it's here underneath the collarbone. So I push forwards and then I just relax here. I suck it in. And that makes my arm become a part of a circle. So when I yield, I contain a space, and that space is empty, which allows room for the other person. Not their body, their mind really, their spirit. But this is the retrieval of ward off. That's the first thing that happens at the beginning of a new posture in the form. You retrieve ward off, you hollow the chest, and that brings up the elbow. There's a sense of my shoulder sort of rolling over, and this space really softens. What I want to do is feel it in the hip as well. So as this softens and my elbow comes up, this softens and my knee comes up. You can lift the heel, that will make it feel even more strongly. Or you can just sink the hip. If I sink the hip, then effectively my knee relatively is coming up. Feeling is that as I start to yield, I pushed forwards with my hand. So my yielding starts to withdraw my hand back, but keeps my elbow going forwards, as though my elbow is trying to loop behind the back of the other person. So here my hand is yielding, but my elbow is still advancing. And then I draw everything back. Same with the knee. So here, I open here, and the knee feels like it's trying to get behind the back of the person. And now it's the whole side of my body that's yielding, but I feel it particularly here. This is the softening, the hollowing here, and really the active parts of my body are my knees and my elbow. It's the knee and the elbow that continues going out in order to embrace the other person, to get around the back of them. But just imagine there's like a pole here. Digs into here and digs into here. So there's a sense of your wrapping around that pole. And now let's change the legs and just do one where we just come backwards and forwards. The way we did this when we first started with John It's just backwards and forwards, just letting the arms swing. So just get into that, trying to keep the hips forwards, keep your headlights forwards. And then just slowly bring in the figures of eights. So here I'm coming up the figure of eight and then down. Here I'm coming underneath the figure of eight and then up. So as I move backwards, I'm going down the figure of eight. And then as I come forwards, I'm coming up the figure of eight. We're trying to wake up the bottom of the figure of eight. So this part here where I really reach behind myself. I reach behind myself, but then as I start coming up the figure of eight, I start coming up the figure of eight whilst my hands are still behind me. So there's this sense that my hands are trying to rise up my spine, and then they have to slip out because obviously they can't come up completely. And now this is very much in front of me, coming down my front. And then this reaches back behind me and comes up my back. We'd like, if we were flexible enough, to really be able to reach up the spine here with the hands, at least to the heart. And then once it's established, just let it loosen up a little bit. Let the two sides begin to play a little bit, which will manifest in subtle turns and in a lack of synchronicity between the two hands. So if you were to really bring this to an extreme, you just end up doing figures of eights, alternate figures of eights. Bring it back to riding horse and central equilibrium. What appears as stillness is actually full of movement. And then let's just try a little bit of just moving from leg to leg. What we want to do here is just feel how it's basically just the same as this exercise that we've done with establishing the ward off, the yielding. So we want to feel that what actually stimulates our movement is our need to yield. So when I pull myself into this foot, I'm basically rounding out, I'm making ward off in the leg. So my heel rises, my knee bends, and I get pulled towards it in this direction. I wake up to the spirit. So the spirit is in the attack. So the attack is here. The attack is in the extension. Now the spirit for the yield is at the very, very beginning, as the attack needs to turn into the yield. So as my extending needs to contract, that's the point where there's a sudden change. And that requires spirit. Otherwise, it will be slow and sluggish. So here, the spirit sparks in order to turn this straightening leg into a bending leg. So technically, when I straighten the leg, I'm straightening the toes. It's almost like my toes are coming off the ground. And then the bending of the leg starts when I lift the heel. That's the trigger. The heel lifting is the spark that commences the yield and starts me moving back into the leg and turning me around towards the leg. The spirit is sort of sparking around you. It's never inside you. So here it's here. And then here it's here. Just imagine you've gone for a walk with a child. They're sort of running ahead, enjoying themselves, and trips over, bangs themselves, starts crying. You're slightly irritated. So you stand there, get up. And then it gets up, and then you just start to soften, and you just go up and you just put your arms around it and lift it up. So a change of heart. That's what we're after all the time. So you've attacked, and then there's a change of heart. You soften and embrace. Your softening is expressed by your willingness to embrace. In order to embrace, it's a really magical thing, embracing something. Because what's happening is you're pulling yourself back and away in order to create space. And that very act of withdrawing yourself actually extends your arms behind the person. You know, it's really quite magical. And that's all it is. Tai Chi is just endless hugging. So here, and I just soften and encircle. You're encircling, enveloping the other and everything they contain. You know, they may be angry at you. They're certainly in pain. Everyone's in pain. And so you're just willing to take all that on board. And if you're not, then they'll feel it. They'll feel this barrier. There's part of you that's not properly withdrawing. You're saving space for yourself. This is what we have to guard against. So here, this is complete hollowing and rounding. And in order to get that, I have to make sure I don't move into the foot too soon. So I have to make sure that all of this hollowing and this emptying has happened before I come into that foot. This is what's difficult. Part of me is very, very quick. So quick to move and to respond that it does it before. And another part of me is really reluctant and sluggish and heavy and needs a lot of coaxing. So it's my spirit that's quick and responsive. So my spirit responds. My spirit wants to give a hug, but my body doesn't want to move out of this foot because it's lazy. This real delay, there's like a lag all the time between the spirit and the body. And we in a sense, we sort of dwell in that region. We dwell in that time space where the two phases are always overlapping. We dwell in the lag. Because the lag is the place that's common to both. There's spirit, a bit of spirit, and there's body. So here, something in me opens up, and then slowly my body gets sucked into that hole. So it's not just the other person that gets drawn into this yielding space, it's me as well. This is the yielding space, it's just above this foot. And so both of us are moving towards it. I have to have a sense that my arms are reaching at least behind the other person. So you really need to be able to imagine them. I feel them and I imagine them. My arms are reaching back. The more I reach with my arms, the more my chest hollows. And so the more space I have for them to come into. Metanoia. That's the Greek word for change of heart. And now let's just bring it back. No equilibrium. Heavy sacrum. My relaxing at the sacrum, which will give a feeling that it's expanding across like that. That's just the sacroiliac. There's a loosening a little bit. That will allow the flow down my spine to bifurcate at the sacrum and flow down each leg. The more I can get this sense of expansion and relaxation here, the more that will push my knees out and push me onto the outside edges of my feet, which is where I want to be. That will then strengthen the inside arch of the foot, and then the energy from the ground can sneak up the inside of the legs into the groin, into the spine and up. So the energy flowing down comes out of the sacrum and down the backs and the sides, the outsides of the legs. And the energy coming up comes up the front and the inside of the legs. So there's that equilibrium. But in a sense, there's also an equilibrium between yield and attack. there's part of me that's always ready to just go into the offensive, that's ready to send my energy out aggressively. And there's another part of me that's always willing to just soften and embrace. So I want to feel the equilibrium between those as well. So when we're standing here in riding horse, and obviously we're with yielding mind, because there's a sense that we've already yielded, but out of this, that the attack can come. Or I can just yield even more and just take it in. So let's just go into holding the golden urn. So here my elbows are up and out. Let's just turn the palms out to start with. Now this is like an extreme version of riding horse and ward off. So it's stronger. I'm trying to get my fingers horizontal. My thumbs point down effectively. My palms are facing out. And the struggle is just to keep the shoulders relaxing down the arms. So it feels much stronger than normal riding horse. You feel the tingling in the arms and you start shaking much sooner. And then we just go into holding the golden urn. So remember what that was? I drop my elbows and my hands flatten out as though to hold a tray. Imagine you're holding a tray and it's really heavy. So you need a sense that you're getting your belly and your sacrum underneath it. If the forearms extend, then they would meet in the dantian. So this will tend to bring you more into the front of the foot because it's just a bit more aggressive. You're no longer the back of the cylinder. Now it feels like you're almost tumbling out of yourself. And then we just roll it into riding horse. So just yielding. I yield here. So I'm going to yield with my right arm. So normally Tai Chi young style, they would yield this way. So if I'm going to yield with my right arm, then I would turn to the right and bring the person through this side. Here, I'm going to yield with my right arm, but actually get a feeling that I'm trying to bring them through to my left. So I have to keep my elbow down just to keep their arm away from my center. And then very quickly after that movement, you turn back to the front and draw their arm out this side. So before their fist has reached anywhere close to you, you've whipped their arm out of the way. So they have come in like this. They feel like they're being directed down here. And then suddenly they're whipped open like this. And it just really exposes their chest, which you then come in to attack. So I yield to my left with my right hand, and then I scoop their arm out of the way to my right, and then I just push forwards and bang them in the chest with the ward off, with the palm facing out. And then I do the other one. So yielding to the right with my left hand, and then opening them up, and then pressing forwards. And now I'm in riding horse with the palms facing out. And then I can just settle more into the heels. As the fingers are trying to pull together, it's stretching here. So it's like my fingers are trying to pull towards each other, but my shoulders are being pulled away from each other. And then I just slip into holding the golden urn again. And now my fingers are pushing away from each other. So my left fingers are trying to move that direction. My right finger's here, and that is really compressing here, squeezing the heart a little bit. So my student, who's the acupuncturist, he was quite surprised when we did this, because he said, wow, you can really feel it in the heart meridian. So the heart meridian goes through the little finger, but on the inside edge. And then when we go into riding horse, with the palms facing out, he said this is small intestine meridian. So the same little finger, but now it goes through this point here, and the heart one goes the other side. Let's just try it once more. So I yield, I draw the person, I open them up effectively, and then I strike their open chest, and then I yield, I open them up, and again I strike their open chest. Once you're in position, just try and relax the shoulders. It will always tend to sort of bunch them up like that. That's okay. I just don't want to feel like I'm holding on there. If they bunch up, it's because of the arms. It's not because of me getting anxious. That's it. And then you can just hold this for quite a while. And the same with the golden urn. They're both real energy postures, much more than our normal riding horse. So the normal riding horse is more just for sort of strengthening the legs. You can just endure it a lot longer, whereas this will get you buzzing much more quickly. And now let's try this exercise. Try and feel the figure of 8 within the foot. I'm doing a figure of 8 like this inside my foot. So as I turn to the left, I'm going around the top of the left foot's figure of 8, but also I'm going around the bottom of the right foot's figure of 8. Want to feel this real movement within the foot. The foot is sort of wriggling and writhing on the ground all the time. So when I'm standing in a seemingly stationary posture, I want the feeling that my feet are just doing this all the time. There's a lot of activity. John didn't talk about this very much, but it was there all the time with him. So what he would often emphasize is that, when you get the correct activity, particularly in your feet and your hands. So remember, as soon as we discovered the figures of 8, he was just figure of 8 with his hands all the time. Even when he was eating, he'd be eating like this in front of the telly, and one hand would be doing this. It's happening in the feet and the hands particularly, but also the face. So he always used to say that he was going to devise a series of exercises that would strengthen the muscles in the face. So there's a sense that you're going through all these contortions in your face. The eyes are sort of looking up, the eyebrows, the jowls, the jaw is shifting side to side all the time. We'd like to feel this figure of 8 getting into every part of the body. So as one hand comes up in front of you, the other hand is going down but behind you. I want to feel the difference between the two hands. If I can feel them being very different, you know, the bottom of the figure eight being so different from the top of the figure eight, then I can sort of keep my attention on them and keep them separate. If both feel the same, they'll just blur together and just become a bit of a mess. The shoulders have to be quite flexible. And now let's just finish with just a little bit of going around the feet with a figure of eight. Yeah, so this is really peaceful and quiet compared to what we've just done. And this is always there. Whenever we move, there's always this broad figure of eight connecting the two sides of the body, showing how they work, how they play. As one side does one thing, the other side wants to do the opposite. It's just a natural balance within the body. It's just waving hands in the clouds, basically. Waving hands in the clouds is just tracing the figure of eight around your hips or around your feet. And if I can just keep this going and keep my mind quiet and attentive, then the energy will go up a notch, and each loop of the figure of eight will start to contain its own figure of eight. So this loop here starts to contain its own figure of eight, which is happening inside the foot. So it proliferates. John was really big on this principle of proliferation. So the one, me, becomes two, the two sides of my body, and then that becomes four. Each side of my body splits and becomes two. And then if we take the energy up a notch again, that four becomes eight. And this is just the way it works. So the figure of eight within my foot is a front foot and a back foot. And then each one of those can split. So I get a little figure of eight inside the front foot, and I get a little figure of eight inside the back foot. And you can work on them. You can feel them. Bring it back to central equilibrium. I really want to feel this flow. Like I'm just capturing a lot of energy. I have like a big funnel. The mouth of my funnel is really big, and I'm collecting all of this downward energy that's flowing down my spine, washing me. And then if I can keep this relaxed, it will split down my legs and into the ground. And then I have another funnel facing down, and that's bringing nutrients, energy out of the ground up my body, which I then distribute above me. And then just bring it out. Keep a sense of this 2 figures of 8s going in the 2 feet. So there's always this sort of wriggle going on inside me. And you can let that be in the background and allow your stillness and quietness to be in the foreground. But it's always there. It's always ready to leap in and save your life.